Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. We continue our look back at the remaining text reviews not yet made into videos with the second review I ever wrote, Thunderstrike #1. This one I got a bit of flack for when I originally wrote it, since there were actually quite a few fans of the character who felt I was being unfair. And they're not necessarily wrong. As we saw with the iBots review last week, I was a lot angrier back in 2007, and I may have exaggerated a book's problems. I'm not perfect, and opinions can change. Although, let's not be disingenuous. Sometimes a work is as bad or good as you remember it being. Thunderstrike is the story of Eric Masterson, who for a time was Thor. Yeah, for those who have complained about other characters taking over the role of an established hero, it's not exactly a new phenomenon. Even if legacy characters weren't a thing, books will get shaken up by having a hero temporarily, or even permanently, give up the mantle to someone else. It's been happening for decades, and 9 times out of 10, the original ends up back in the role anyway. Superhero comics love nothing more than the status quo. And I don't mean the status quo of a regular type of story like it should, with occasional big events to shake things up. I mean the status quo of, this character is this superhero identity. Frankly, it's shocking to me that Nightwing has never reverted back to Robin in the last 30 years in the comics. It might happen eventually, but it seems to be one of those things that everybody accepts as better. Sure, movies and TV shows will always see Dick Grayson as Robin, but staying in his more adult role for this long is something to be celebrated, I think. So no, I don't always think changing out an established hero is a bad thing, especially when it can mean positive growth for that character. Sure, it'll more likely than not revert back, but the new character might be better, or at least get some new interest in them when all is said and done. And that seemed to be the case for Eric Masterson. He was a supporting character in the Thor books for quite a while before Odin linked the two together, like he had with Donald Blake, with Eric eventually just gaining the power of Thor on his own. And thus he acted as Thor for quite a while. In fact, the Thor we saw in the Infinity Gauntlet event was Eric. Thor reclaimed his mantle and legacy eventually, but Eric retained his powers and got his own weapon, a mace. That would be the focus point of his own powers, like Mjolnir does with Thor. And thus he got his own spin-off title, which we're talking about today. And of course, this episode is actually properly following up on an old review, The Secret Defenders #9 and #10 reviews back in the day, which featured Thunderstrike in them, along with a crap ton of terrible artwork. Oh, and the first appearance of the show's theme song, so that's neat. Like with iBots, I was pretty critical of this comic when I first reviewed it on February 24th, 2007, so let's dig into Thunderstrike #1 and see if it deserved as much vitriol as I gave it.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he's a man punch, wears a pretty hat. Linkara, he has a magic gun. Where'd he purchase that? Linkara, coins, robots, Amazon and trucks. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara.
While iBots came after the speculator boom, Thunderstrike came out in 1993, so we are hip deep in the 90s and 90s comic trends, including, of course, a big old dose of sparkly foil covers for Thunderstrike's lightning effects. And yeah, as I've said, I'm a sucker for these effects. They're gimmicky as all hell, but it appeals to that inner child in me who loves shiny things. And Lord knows the cover needs it, because my inner child is an outer one for Thunderstrike on this cover, since he looks like a baby throwing a temper tantrum. Hey, what's the best way to depict our hero on this cover? Oh, I know! Make him look like he's doing this! First explosive issue! Yeah, but with the foil on it, it's clearly a glitter bomb. We open in the middle of a carjacking. and with a really, really over-the-top narrator. Carjacking! A national disgrace that is spread across this land like an unchecked cancer! What's that? A rising tide of white nationalism? I think you mean carjacking, don't you? Carjacking! No one is safe. None are spared! Millions of people are dead! A woman named Carol is forced from her car. But that's when the horror bursts from Carol's lips, a cry full of desperation, fear, and something more. Constipation. Let me make clear here that I'm not trying to make fun of the victims of carjacking. It is still a crime, it is still assault, it is potentially traumatizing, and it's of course a horrible thing whenever it happens. I'm just making fun of overwrought narration about it. And if you don't think that this is overselling carjacking a bit, I remind you that the first line of this comic makes carjacking analogous to cancer. And hell, why do they call it a national disgrace? It's America's fault that there's so much carjacking happening? I do not understand this. Was there some huge epidemic of carjackings in 1993 to warrant this narration? Apparently her screaming pisses off the carjackers. Bad move, lady. Real dumb. Yeah, you should have kept your mouth shut until we were out of here. What the hell did you expect her to do? 3 strangers in masks just forced her car door open and pulled her out of it. What part of this situation made you think, yeah, she'll be pretty calm about it? And what's more, they imply they're gonna kill her now for this. I'm assuming you don't want her screaming because it'll attract attention, but if that's the case, why are you sticking around to kill her? Just take the car and run! Fortunately for Carol, Eric Masterson has arrived, still wearing Thor's costume, and it's a 2-page spread that we have to turn on its side. To be fair to the comic, it's clearly supposed to imply just how big and tall and impressive the guy is. Cynically, however, I just see this as a way to pad out a 40-page comic. I do love how Eric in the Thor costume is wearing a mask with the helmet. It ends up making him look like a bearded version of Zex Marquise from Gundam Wing. Let her go. The words are spoken softly, through gritted teeth, but they strike with the force of a blazing thunderbolt! Yeah, look at all the force and power he commands, with his tiny word balloon and even tinier words inside said balloon. For a moment, all is silent as the carjackers gaze in awe, and more than a little fear, at the one-man strike force who stand before them.
Ha 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 ha! Your costume is ridiculous!
And then, with a suddenness that would surely leave these terrorists gasping in wonder if they were only permitted to breathe, Eric Masterson springs forward! Well, no wonder carjackers are such a feared thing in this comic. They're also terrorists! Smell my elbows! Smell them! And yeah, labeling them as terrorists isn't a one-time thing either. But even as the golden-haired Avenger drives the 2 terrorists groundward, I mean, I get as upset as anybody else when domestic terrorists fail to get labeled as terrorists, but not every crime is terrorism! Oh no! A pickpocket stole my wallet! Terrorism! Jeez, just imagine how much worse the Fixer from Holy Terror would be if all crime counted as terrorism. Anyway, the last carjacker decides to try to run Eric over. That decision does not end well for him, as Eric smashes his mace down on the car, completely wrecking it and sending shards of glass everywhere and probably killing the guy in the process. It's a bit of an overreaction. The car wasn't far enough away to build up enough speed to potentially do any harm to him. He probably could have just held the car off of him with one hand. What's more, I'm pretty sure, given how fast he was moving when he shoved his arms into the 2 carjackers, yet they were actually being dragged through the air off of their feet, I'm guessing they're dead from broken necks, too. A moment later, a pair of cops come running up. We got a report of a disturbance here, and oh man, they weren't kidding! Considering this started no more than a minute ago, that was pretty impressive speed, guys. Eric says everything is under control, but laments in his head how he screwed up by acting so quickly to smash the car. Namely that he screwed over the victim of this whole mess. Not sure if the woman's insurance will cover this, or if the Avengers even have some kind of liability policy, or if he needs to get something special for himself on an individual basis. It's a common question of superhero media, which is why it will never be brought up again in this book. Eric swings his mace and flies off with it, of course looking absolutely ridiculous as he does so, trying to do the splits in midair while swinging his other arm under him like he was imitating an ape. At the time I wrote the original review, I wasn't sure if the whole hammer/mace pulling the user in a direction for flight thing was really how it worked, and I do have to wonder how one course corrects during this. Or, since Thor can call Mjolnir back to himself in the movies, can he and Thunderstrike just will to go in a different direction while in mid-flight? Anyway, as a figure on a nearby rooftop watches him, he thinks to himself a bit. Those cops kept calling me Thor. That's a big mistake. How could they even think I'm Thor when up until recently I was him and look exactly like him? He gives a very condensed recap of his relation to Thor, but feels it's wrong to use his name. Guess I'll just pull out the old thesaurus tonight. Wait, that's it! Thorsaurus! His mace transforms into a walking stick when he taps the ground, hiding the weapon. My only problem with that is that it's not like a cane or something. It looks like an old gnarled tree branch, which frankly is kind of conspicuous. Anyway, he figures he can come up with a cool sounding name. After all, how hard could it be? Not very, considering the Einsteins who usually write those hokey comic books that my son is always buying. So, like, I know that in-universe Marvel Comics exists and publishes their own in-universe fictionalized versions of their superheroes. So, is there like a subset of publishers of superhero comics who come up with really terrible names for them? Anyway, Eric is here to meet with his friend Samantha for lunch. He's worried at first because he's a bit late, but she says she actually only just got there too. The two have some exposition conversation about Eric's own life, how his ex-wife took their son to a visit to his parents recently, and how he hasn't visited them in a while, how he's hoping to get a job as an architect with a firm, and how Samantha is getting a loft soon and wouldn't mind him as a roommate, something he's eager to do since he's been staying at Avengers Mansion. We cut over to Eric's ex-wife, who is opening up the latest in a series of health clubs with her new husband, who's apparently a member of the fictional football team, the New York Smashers. And I can't help but notice that this promotional infomercial she's filming in a fancy, shoulderless red dress seems unnecessary for a friggin' health club. Wouldn't it make more sense to be wearing the workout gear she's sporting in the cardboard cutout? Also, the placement of a sign seems questionable given her dress. Meet the Smashers! Are we sure this infomercial isn't just a setup for a porn scene? This'll be your best infomercial yet, Miss Steele. Well, not if the cameraman keeps talking to her during it. Even if this is for B-roll footage, it's not like she can respond to him while posing. Her husband says he'll be going out for beer with the guys, but later, said guys let him go since he says he's exhausted. He thinks to himself that he hates lying to both parties because of what he's really doing, and then he gets knocked out and his car stolen. Geez, given how this carjacker and the previous ones looked, apparently there's an official uniform for carjackers. The thieves soon arrive in a warehouse full of other stolen cars, loudly announcing how they've stolen such an expensive vehicle. Although maybe it's supposed to be different carjackers, since this one and his buddy are now wearing completely different jackets than before. But enough of that, their boss shows up and yeah, take a look at the mastermind behind this operation. Dreadlocks, big trench coat, purple pants, yellow shirt, big red boots, a belt with no loops so the end of it has to be tied into the front. And, of course, the crowning feature, the mask. Behold the insidious carjacking street equivalent of Dr. Doom, Dr. Dumb.
There. Sure glad I don't look stupid in this.
Anyway, the boss is upset not just with this carjacker's bravado, but how he accidentally spilled blood on the front seat of the car from his victim. I'm sorry, Carjack. Wait, the villain's name is Carjack? Wow, Eric was not kidding when it comes to comic writers and lame names. I mean, yeah, I guess it's descriptive enough given his entire deal, but that just brings up a few questions. One, why even bother with the supervillain outfit and moniker at all? If it's for anonymity, wear a more distinctive ski mask like the goons and just go by boss. Hell, doing this already just seems like it's adding a bunch of extra bulk to your attire. Two, why are you limiting your identity as a criminal to one thing? What's gonna happen if your carjacking operation gets screwed up and you move on to drug dealing? Are you just gonna be pusher or dealer or something then? Third, I guess I don't know what else you could really call this guy, but at least my Dr. Dumb insult is more interesting. We cannot continue to hold the city in a grip of true terror without proper discipline. Look upon the face of your nightmares, New York, and despair. Why are you all laughing? Stop that! We have already lost 3 of our brothers today. The time has come to increase the pressure and turn up the heat. None can withstand me. I am dumb. Wait. To be fair, Carjack is not the main villain of the story, but he is the first one we see. I think anyone who was clamoring for a solo series for Eric Masterson may have been a bit disappointed by the caliber of villain they presented out of the gate. Meanwhile, Eric goes to pick up his son, only to find out from him about the attack on his ex-wife's new husband, and naturally he's distraught. Also there is his son's teacher and his former assistant. The kid's teacher says that somebody needs to do something about the carjackers. Mr. Marrero, Ed, are you suggesting that people take the law into their own hands? If it's necessary. It's pretty harsh, man. Imagine a world where people decided to take the law into their own hands as some kind of vigilante crime fighters utilizing their own unique skills. Pretty unbelievable, if you ask me. Eric's son, knowing that Eric is somehow connected to Thor, asks him to talk to the hero to get the Avengers to help. There's a scene at the hospital where McCready from John Carpenter's The Thing treats the guy's wounds, and we're led to believe that he might be the villain we're introduced to on the next page. Bloodaxe. While Carjack was like a really poor ripoff of Dr. Doom's design, Bloodaxe is like a 90s revamp of the Red Skull. Big metal Red Skull helmet, huge spiky shoulder pad with a red chain attached to their namesake's axe, a leather jacket, spikes on the top of their foot, and of course, big skull knee pads. So, what's Bloodaxe's deal? Well, those carjackers from the beginning of the comic are in police custody, but Bloodaxe is worried about them actually getting put in jail, or their arrest leading to the rest of the gang. Few would have the courage, the daring to seek vengeance upon those who are already held by the police. That's because those people are less courageous and daring, and more stupid and unnecessary. So there you have it. This person sees themselves as a hero bestowing justice while wearing a bunch of skulls.
Are we the baddies?
Just to spoil this right away, Bloodaxe is actually a woman named Jackie, whom we'll meet later in the book, though that fact is kept secret in this issue. The axe she wields is actually the one owned by Scourge, whom you might recall from Thor Ragnarok. Anyway, Bloodaxe soon arrives at the jail where the carjackers are being held, blasting through the cell and demanding to know where Dr. Dumb is. Back over to Eric, he's soaring through the air with his mace, in a rather odd pose considering the mace is supposed to be dragging him along. He's wondering how to proceed with his investigation, especially since he doesn't think he should get the Avengers involved. It's hardly the kind of crime you'd typically associate with one of Earth's mightiest heroes, or whatever the Avengers are calling themselves these days. Wouldn't get involved! But Eric, haven't you heard? Carjacking is a national disgrace that is spreading across this land like an unchecked cancer! Spotting some police cars with their sirens blaring, he decides to follow and discovers the attack on the jail cell. Bloodaxe is long gone, but he already slaughtered the 3 carjackers after obtaining the info he wanted. Eric is tangled with Bloodaxe before, but more so because of the mystical origin of the axe, he's able to follow him, having the cops in turn follow him. And indeed, Bloodaxe arrives at the chop shop to do a bit of chopping of his own. For the space of a dozen heartbeats, no one moves, no one speaks. Hey. Is that Ghost Rider? The narration says that, shockingly enough, Carjack and his cronies instinctively know that they have no chance against Bloodaxe. Fortunately for them, though, Eric arrives to tackle Bloodaxe from behind in, not a 2-page spread, but a single splash page that must be turned on its side. Because that was necessary. Eric quickly learns that unfortunately his newer powers are not quite as on par to the levels he was at as Thor, so Bloodaxe is more easily able to fight back. In the past, the two were able to fight to a standstill, but here he can't even summon up a thunderstorm to aid him, which seems like a bit of a design flaw when the mace is actually named Thunderstrike. Bloodaxe knocks Eric around, ranting that criminals deserve to be killed, while Carjack and his goons realize that they need to get the hell out of there. They decide to go with anonymity, removing all their masks because none of the victims have seen their faces. Dr. Dumb doesn't even have real dreadlocks. He's some white dude who looks like, well, every other grizzled 90s hero in the vein of Cable. They try to bluff their way past the police, but of course it doesn't really work. Bloodaxe gets ready to kill Eric to keep him from interfering, although I should point out that this is actually one of Eric's friends and potential love interests, so good job there, lady. But fortunately, some kind of energy burst repels Bloodaxe as the cops get in closer. Bloodaxe makes a run for it, and Eric thanks the cops for saving him, but they claim they just heard the same blast. Eric speculates to himself about who it could have been. Thor, or even Lady Sif, but he disregards both possibilities. Although if it was either one of them, it was a literal deus ex machina. Eric also realizes just how thoroughly unprepared he was for this fight in this totally necessary and not padding at all splash page filled up with his meaty, beaten-up face. He also decides that since everyone keeps confusing him with Thor, it's time to stop living off of his reputation and get some new threads. As such, he heads to Spotlight Costumes, which is apparently some kind of superhero costume shop. The shop owner apparently has met him before.
Oh, hi, Johnny. I didn't know it was you.
So here's a weird thing. Inside of this shop appears to be Captain America and Spider-Man. Considering they say nothing, I'm inclined to say that these are just mannequins, but that doesn't make any sense for them to be there either, since Captain America's outfit was provided by the government, while Spidey made his own threads. So, what the hell, lady? Anyway, Eric is here to get a new... Ah! Hey Eric, David Byrne called. He wants his coat back. Anyway, she looks over some quick sketches he's put together. Interesting. You're obviously going for a look which combines the classic with the contemporary. Might I suggest a V-shaped collar shared by every other hero in the line, a lack of trunks, and then backpedaling on that hard once we reach the 1000th issue? But a cape is way too 60s. Mind if I make a few suggestions? What's that? You want me to use the Edna Mode clip of her saying, "No capes"? Shut up. Capes are awesome and he's super powerful. He'd be fine. Well, I've always thought an earring can be so sexy on the right man. And sexy jewelry is clearly the thing you need to be worried about with this costume instead of a cape. Just like, really? Sexiness is the priority? And what's even funnier is that we see these two concept sketches for outfits and yeah, the top one looks a bit too much still like Thor, but the other one is fine and they're otherwise ignored. What other brilliant costume ideas does she have? Also, that huge coat, gotta keep that. It'll be all the rage after The Matrix comes out. Cutting away from that, we soon see that Carjack and his cronies were able to be let go because of lack of evidence. Although I think that chop shop would be pretty compelling evidence, but what the hell do I know? His lawyer recommends he lay low for a while. No can do, lawyer man. Not unless you're donating your services. We'll be hitting the streets harder than ever. After we party! Dr. Dumb has come to boogie! Laughter, colder than the air, begins to echo. Moving on to the weather, we have a low laughter system moving in from the northeast. We cut to Eric, who's meeting up with Jackie Lucas for a date. A few hours later, Eric Masterson arrives at the apartment of Jackie Lucas. In their time, they have been business associates and friends. But tonight, they could be so much more. The narrator is really creepily invested in these two banging. And considering she's Blood Axe, that just makes the whole thing kinkier. However, the TV is still turned on. The district attorney's office has confirmed the release of the man the newspapers have dubbed Carjack. This has been Plot Convenience News, the most extreme news network, for being extremely convenient. Plot Convenience News. So wait, it's the newspapers that started calling him Carjack? See, this is why print is dying, people. Also, considering they were apparently unable to prove he's Carjack, isn't it kind of breaking some journalistic ethics by specifically calling him a known criminal? Anyway, Eric says that with that news, he needs to call his ex-wife and inform her of that because of the attack on her new husband. He's calling his ex-wife? In the middle of my date? What's sad is that her turning into Blood Axe seems like a perfectly reasonable response to that. His ex and his son have already heard, and it seems our poor football player decided to go off on the attack. Bobby saw the news and tore out of here on a rampage! Rampage! Deciding he needs to go to try to save Bobby, Eric apologizes and runs off. Questions blaze within Jackie's mind. Is it some misguided sense of responsibility, some macho jock ethic which drives Eric on this fool's errand? Or does he really need to use the bathroom and just thinks it'd be rude to use hers? Tonight could have been, would have been, so special! The narrator then proceeds to treat us to his fanfiction about their date. Carjack and his goons must have gone to the same damn warehouse again to party, since Blood Axe is able to easily find them and grab him by the back of the neck. The legal system is really doing a bang-up job in this comic. Didn't secure the warehouse and everything inside of it. Carjack and his goons were easily released within 24 hours. Just amazing. Oh, and I guess Bloodaxe can teleport given how she arrives in this panel. Otherwise, it looks like she's about to strike down with the axe. Anyway, before she can kill Dr. Dumb, Eric makes his appearance on a splash page. And while the artwork just being some motion lines and a lot of blank space, the outfit doesn't look that bad. It's certainly embracing the 90s leather jacket over your regular costume aesthetic that was popular among a lot of heroes, but with the dark base and the old Thor outfit, it's not terrible. Probably should have kept the mask, though. Anyway, Eric proclaims, "No one dies tonight! Not if I can help it!" Spoilers, people die tonight. Eric confirms that Bloodaxe can apparently teleport, but he wonders where Bobby is. Bloodaxe is unimpressed with Eric. "Your ridiculous attempt at a heroic entrance was as pathetic as your new uniform! I mean, come on! Who wears a leather jacket?" Huh. As the two grapple, Carjack and his goons open fire on them. Bloodaxe, annoyed by all this, decides to deal with them. "By the power of my enchanted weapon, I shall repel their deadly bullets with a stream of magnetic force!"
I am
Bloodaxe.
Master of Magnet.
Several of the goons are hit by the bullets and Eric goes nuts. "No! No one was supposed to get hurt! No one was supposed to die! You made me waste my earlier dramatic declaration! Now how am I supposed to look cool?" The two continue their brawl, leading to a kind of lame two-page spread. I say kind of because the background is pretty garbage, but then we've got this shot of Eric deflecting Bloodaxe's axe away from her, and it's really close to the reader. Like, that'd be the money shot if this was in 3D. Anyway, Carjack and his group have fled while the battle continues on, doing enough damage to the warehouse to risk it collapsing on top of them. Bloodaxe rises from the wreckage like some terrifying phoenix of legend. Yeah, phoenixes are known for having skulls all over them and carrying cars, right? "No battle with Bloodaxe is ever truly over, Thor. Not until the executioner has a victory claimed. I want a loot box, damn it!" "That's what you think, pal, and please stop calling me Thor!" Well, what the hell else do you expect her to call you when you haven't given a new name? Acting on instinct, Eric swings his mace at Bloodaxe and shoots out some kind of beam of energy, knocking her away. Naturally, he's shocked to discover this new power, but this finally causes the warehouse to collapse. Bloodaxe manages to get away, but she can't find her axe amidst the rubble. The police soon arrive and take Dr. Dumb and his minions into custody, apparently finding enough drugs and illegal weaponry in the wreckage to nail them. And so our comic ends with Eric finally emerging from all the rubble. "It's him! It's the mighty Thor!" "No, he's the other guy. My name is, Thunderstrike. No, wait! Thunderstrike!" However, he's unhappy with the name he's chosen. Dumb, dumb, dumb! Why? There's nothing bad about that name. But it's better than Sparky the Lightning Kid. He got renamed to Spunky. Thunderstrike doesn't know what happened to Bobby or Bloodaxe, again trying to imply a connection between the two. But hey, he's walking away with Bloodaxe's axe, so that's a plus. I must have gotten hit a little too hard in the head, because it actually seems to be whispering to me. What's that? Kill the president? Well, whatever you say, magic talking axe. While the original text review of this was unnecessarily angry and spiteful, this comic does suck. The artwork is passable, but there are a lot of deficiencies, especially in the backgrounds, although that's par for the course in the 90s. For a 40-page book, it's pretty lacking in the story, containing a lot of unnecessary splash pages, two-page spreads, and other such space fillers. The writing is fairly bare bones, and there's just not a lot happening to justify the length. We'll get some setup for what'll be the new status quo for Eric, introduce some of the supporting cast, but the overly dramatic narrator and the continual flowery prose about how bad the carjacking situation has gotten sours me to a lot of the book. The pacing is fine though, and we do get some moments of character stuff for Eric as we see him struggling with his new superhero role compared to his old one. Bloodaxe, while being a bit one-note in their rantings, has a cool design that helps elevate the book, since obviously we don't really want to see some jackass who steals cars as our inaugural villain for Eric's book. Structurally, the book is fine, setting up interpersonal stuff, initial fight where the hero loses, and then later the hero triumphs, but there's just too much mediocrity in these 40 pages for me to call it good. That being said, the original text review was much too jerky about Thunderstrike as a character, and a lot of the complaints I made don't hold up at all. The book isn't good, but my original text review wasn't really either. Funny how 10 years will make you a better writer and critic. Speaking of, next time we're taking a break from redoing text reviews because it's time for the anniversary of the text reviews with the final issue of the first volume of Youngblood. Hey, check out what's supposed to be Blood Axe's face in the sky. It looks like a cheap comic adaptation of the Screaming Skull.